Today, I have McKenna Burgess, who is a sexologist and somatic therapist. And I am so excited to have this conversation because I think it's such an important topic for, everyone, but I think especially what we're going through now collectively and how women are trying or working to come back into their body. This is such a huge piece of that. And it's a piece that I think that we don't invite into the conversation a lot of times when we talk about embodiment. So I'm so excited. If we want to start with just if you are, open to sharing your human design and astrology, just to kind of like give that base and then introduce yourself and, share as much or as little about your story as you would like and kind of, anything pivotal that got you to where you're at today.
Okay, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so as far as like my human design goes, I don't know a ton, but I know I'm a manifesting generator.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I definitely embody that. I used to think that I was very like, oh, that's not me. But now as I go older, I'm like, oh yeah, that was dead on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm a Pisces and an Aquarius moon and a Virgo rising. So
Okay.
again, as I grow older, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's definitely me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it. Mhm.
And yeah, so I'm super excited to connect today. And yeah, I have quite a bit of background just in different modalities that really led me to this place because I needed so many to get into this place of embodiment and owning who I am and owning that this is my life path and being able to share that with others. And yeah, with that manifesting generator, like stepping into sharing the word more and like knowing that, like, oh yeah, I'm meant to do that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do a wide range of things. So originally, kind of the journey started probably with yoga. And originally, it was definitely more of a like quick pace vinyasa, make sure you challenge yourself, try all these challenges, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm actually a Kundalini yoga instructor. And it's like totally opposite. I'm like, oh, you get on the mat for 20 minutes, and that was great, amplified my energy, stretched a little bit. And so, yeah, it's really been a different transformation from the beginning of my journey till now. And it also started kind of about 8 years ago, pretty more intensely when I became a massage therapist. Started really realizing, like, oh, my body doesn't always feel that great. And I've been totally ignoring that. And so that really sparked my curiosity to just dive deeper and deeper. And about 3 years ago is when I found Tantra and found even more embodiment. And that's really when I was like, oh, I've been doing all these things, but now I have a word to it. And that's just continuously led to my share journey, really. That's what inspired me to become a certified sexologist and be able to recognize that for other people and hold space for other people in these ways.
Mhm.
So, really, my own journey, I knew I'm not the only one feeling this, and I know that this information needs to get out there. It was originally more of like, I was so curious about myself, and now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, you got to get all this information out there.
Yeah.
Everyone needs this.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like
so that's
that's
kind of a little about me.
yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
that's so like normal part of the journey, right? We find a way to heal ourselves and then we're like, wait, we can't stop. Like we have to share all of this information because everybody should feel like this. And
absolutely.
yeah, it's interesting with the yoga because I remember when I first started when I first started doing yoga, I was like really heavily working out at the time. And so I would go into a yoga class and I'm like, but I don't feel like I'm sweating as much as like I would when I'm running, right? So then I would like run and then go to a yoga class so that I was already sweating,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
like tagging on. But then same thing, like over time I just really got into like the movement and I realized how like stiff I was and I couldn't move this way and my wrists hurt or like these little things. So it was like then the
Yeah.
slower yoga I found so much use in it. And like because I remember the first time I did yin yoga I was like, this is so boring, I can't hold a pose for like
Painful
10
almost.
minutes
Yeah.
Yeah. But then yeah, and then I found sort of my spirituality along the way, and then I started to view yoga as, and then I became, oh my gosh, I would go to yoga like 6 days a week, and I was obsessed. I just did yoga before I came on here just to like as like a workout because now
Yeah.
it's I think, fitness is a whole other thing, but like I know a lot of people sort of punish themselves through movement rather than, I guess, be more of an embodied experience. And I feel like yoga kind of has this beautiful way of like like, I don't even know if easing you into the like energetics of it. Cause like I think you feel it, and it's interesting at
Yeah.
the end of a yoga class. I always kind of giggle when like I hear everybody that's so uncomfortable in the silence and the stillness. Everybody like fidgets and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's funny because yeah, similar like yin yoga used to like make my skin crawl, and now I'm like,
Mm.
I can't get enough. Whenever I look
Yeah.
for a like session, I'm like, all right, well, what studio is doing something a little bit
Yeah.
more restorative?
Yeah. Can we
Mhm.
talk about Kundalini yoga for a minute? Because like maybe like just starting with like kind of what it is. I've never done one. And I know like I've been on my journey for a while. Obviously, like I know what like Kundalini is. I've heard of it. I've never don't know that I've had an experience myself. The description of the experiences I haven't necessarily had, but like I take like flower essences to activate it, or I'll sometimes be a meditation to activate it. But I don't know that I've like necessarily connected to it in like that kind of like you can't miss it sort of way. And I don't know if I'm misunderstanding it, but what would Kundalini yoga look like, and how would that benefit us?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I do want to say that when I talk to most people about Kundalini, they have very similar thoughts and views. By all means, some are very profound experiences, but our Kundalini can be in full activation for seconds, minutes, days long. Like the process is different for everyone. So just because you kind of haven't had that profound experience, it might have not been as long for you. So I
Mm-hmm.
just want to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
But really, a lot of when we're working with energy and moving it, the best tools are breath, sound, and movement. And that's kind of those core pillars of Kundalini Yoga. So it's lots of mantras and chanting begin to really open up different glands in the upper body, if you will. And then lots of also intuitive movements. A lot of people kind of think when you start to do it, it is very forceful. It kind of, we get into this masculine, make your body move very quickly kind of mode. We work a lot with breath of fire. And so it becomes very detoxifying and it can be very beneficial in those ways, but it also then recognizes that feminine and allowing you to receive. So it becomes into stillness as well. So a lot of times people think it's kind of more about the forcefulness of moving through a breath of fire and moving through some of those uncomfortable postures and continuous chanting. But then it's really about being in stillness, allowing those subtle energies to be able to move and allow that clearing to happen. A lot of the times when we think of healing, we think of like having to do the hard stuff, and Kundalini kind of provides the like move the body, but when we're in that receiving mode, that's really when that energy is clearing itself and really moving through the body as well.
Hmm. So it sounds like getting that energy moving and then being able to witness it in that stillness.
Absolutely. A lot of it is kind of really being able to connect back with your life force. And we work a lot with the ego, if you will, in the Kundalini Yoga and letting go of that and really connecting back with your oneness as well as the oneness of everything.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
what would the benefit for somebody be to choose like Kundalini yoga?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, I kind of always recommend it for even beginners that are like, oh, I can't really hold my body weight up. I can't do this stretching, this and that. I think it's a really good intro to yoga because are working with the multiple limbs of yoga. They have the benefit of really beginning to connect with their body as well as have the detoxification process happen through breath, through the chanting. And I will tell you, even if you're not doing the full class, and even if you're just in the room with others or just being in the room with yourself, you can feel an energetic shift. You
Mm-hmm.
notice it's not just about your aura shifting and your energetic shift. You're really starting to shift within the whole space as well.
Mm-hmm.
So just a lot of, I guess, energetic benefits to it, as
Mm-hmm.
well as physical. We're really detoxifying and using kind of our endocrine system, so all of our different glands and using our hormones to come back into balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the few times I try and be consistent with breath work. I'm terrible at it because it is hard. And I do feel it is powerful and it's hard, I think because of what comes
Absolutely.
through. So there's so many times where I'm like, should I do a meditation? Should I do breath work? And it's like I know that I should do the breath work, but I don't. But because it is like those first like however many minutes, it's like your mind is so like, okay, when is it going to end? When can we stop? Is it over? Like it's really an ego battle, and it is challenging to like move through
Absolutely.
that.
I always say, like, if you listen to one of my Kundalini yoga classes, you'll hear me a million times. Just if there's uncomfortability, let's lean into it. Let's keep pushing through it because you're right. That's kind of when those profound moments happen. In Kundalini, we kind of look at our body as having different valves. And so when we're using that breath work and we're leaning into that uncomfortability, that's when we're really opening those up so that our energetic channels are beginning to lift open and become clear again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what is the connection between Kundalini and sex?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Kundalini is our life force. It's also our sex energy. It's the energy of creation, right? So energy, we were created into this world. So it's the energy that brought us in. And it also transfers into your creative projects and things like that, as well as your sex energy. So whenever you're kind of in those sensual sexual states, you're also working with that life force. When you're kind of, you often feel, or you often hear that hot and heavy because it's your body literally gets hot. You start to feel a different energy within yourself. And that's really all the Kundalini activating. So you might not be in an awakening, but you are in activation. And so I think a lot of times when we start to learn about Kundalini, people are shocked because they've actually worked with it more than they realize. Um, and by all means, we're all born with our own Kundalini, and so it is sacred to ourselves, but we can also work with others' Kundalini. So that's kind of also when that more sensual and sexual realms become activated.
Mm-hmm. So we're working
And
with somebody like a partner when we're intimate, we'll
yes,
like feel theirs activated as well.
yes, you can, of course, by all means, like when we're so tied to this society, we usually shut down our sensations, so it can
Mm-hmm.
be really hard. But when you are intimate, and that doesn't necessarily mean in the bedroom, it can mean in a lot of different ways, you
Mm-hmm.
are feeling into that Kundalini. And almost when you're seeing an aura field, or you're like, when you step into someone's space and you feel that energy, that's a sense also their Kundalini. Our Kundalini is also what's driving our aura field. When we're working with Kundalini yoga, we're trying to kind of clear the aura field, but also amplify it in its most purity, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
how do we recognize that if we've stepped into it or if we're sensing that from someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kundalini kind of oftentimes it can feel like super primal. So when we say that, that can include anger, the feeling of just like maybe not even anger, but just like wanting to scream, or just like different animal characteristics, if you will, like wanting to really be close and tight with someone, if you will, and very knit with them. That's kind of more of that animal character leaning against skin to skin. So primal characteristics are normal to kind of sense, as well as just um, as physical sensations come, those heat sensations. I almost have kind of cooling run through the body sometimes. And then, yeah, when you're stepping into someone's space, when you are doing like Kundalini work yoga, you literally notice they have a heat bubble around them.
Mm.
It's so interesting. You can be like walking around in a class and someone is very activated. You're like, okay, this corner is very heat sensitive. And, of course, sometimes you connect easier than other days. But yeah, I would say kind of more of those primal characteristics and um, more of those sensations flowing throughout the body. Sometimes when we're maybe not in those intimate moments, but doing Kundalini work for just an activation, we're also feeling that sensualness.
Mm.
So if you're feeling like you have the call to want to be by your partner or call your partner or be close to them in some way, that's definitely usually a telltale sign of, maybe some activation within your life force.
Hmm. Yeah, so like over the summer, I usually only read like self-help, spirituality, but I went down that whole like ACOTAR fantasy book, like, and I'm still in it. I'm just like the new series and new series. But my point is, like, I love how the sexuality within those books is so animalistic and primal. Like, it's, when we talk about fairies, it's like, or witches or
Yeah,
anything, especially witches, right? They're so grounded to the earth. And like, so when their like sexual urges come, it's just, and I think that's something that we are so cut off from and we don't allow ourselves to embody. Like, I'm going to use astrology here, but I feel like I've been with quite a few Capricorn moons, and it's almost like they treat sex like a business, where it's like, okay, this is
hmm,
the time, let's get a condom, let's do it. And I'm like, but like, you didn't turn me on,
no,
And I think
absolutely.
that so much of us, whether it's like a time thing or whatever, it's almost been conditioned out of us to embrace that part of ourselves. And I don't know, I think it's sad just because I've
Absolutely.
worked to connect to that, and then it's hard to find um I guess it's hard to find partners that are really, really into that. And it's a beautiful thing.
No, absolutely. And I like that you kind of brought up that, like, yeah, in that fantasy, in those fairy tales, like these people, these characters are very in their grounded mode. And in our society, we've become so desensitized and we're just moving through. And even in the kind of healing world and healing journey, and you always hear like, you want to be in ascension, you want to be in ascension, you want to be living in these upper chakras. And really, like, we're bypassing that true primalistic. That's when we're activating our Kundalini. And so, even our society is like kind of conditioned, like, okay, well, we don't want to feel anything, but we just want to think in the highest. And so we've totally just, yeah, scooted away from what the point is of being in our bodies and connecting to, like, that is ultimately the biggest magic, coming
Mm-hmm.
from ourselves. And so often, yeah, like society has trained us to be looking outside of ourselves for it. And yeah, not being able to be in our root chakra. And that's a lot of the work that I do is helping people come back home to their bodies, is learning to just open that root chakra. It's almost become calloused for so much of our society now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think that, within that, the way that society has, I guess, viewed sex or conditioned us into engaging it, or I'm not sure what term I'm looking for, but that sort of idea of like sex is like false intimacy, right? So we're looking for sex, but I think what we're really looking for is intimacy. And it's like, even during that like orgasmic moment, it's like so spiritual, the place to be, and to just share that with like anyone, and then we confuse it, I think, right?
Absolutely. No, I definitely would agree with that. I think, yeah, no, as you kind of mentioned also, like a lot of people nowadays think of it transactional, and that goes with like time and energy, right? People are like, okay, I'm here. This is enough time and energy that I have, and now I'm done. And so, yeah, even when people are in those most spiritual peaks, they're like, all right, that was done. Great, wrap that up now. And we're over here. And like, yeah, not really actually being able to embody that. We have just like so much shame and guilt around just like being in receiving of that because we need to be doing the next thing or like
Mm.
having our mind elsewhere immediately. And that's just so common nowadays. And yeah, a lot of also the work I do is just learning how to slow down, learning that like it's safe to be okay in your body right now. You don't have to go to your next to-do list. You don't have to. Um, a lot of people that I work with also are serving people all the time. So their next thing is like, okay, how can I help people the next way?
Mm-hmm.
And really just like learning to slow down, that my time is valued, but it doesn't need to be transactional, and really redefining what intimacy is. A lot of people do think of it only in the bedroom. And so, yeah, my one of my favorite quotes is, so intimacy is into me, you see.
Mm.
So that could be anything. Even me just like letting you know my chart, that's a huge
Yeah.
intimacy like moment, and people totally skip over that. They're just
Mm.
like, "Oh yeah, that's great." Like, I'm like, no, you now have knowledge on me, and you don't even
Yeah.
like you're not
Yeah.
taking the value of it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
completely understand. And that's why I try and ask if it's okay or if you're comfortable with it, because I know that when someone shares their chart with me, I know what I can see inside of that, and it
Yeah,
actually sometimes becomes a challenge, not a challenge, but like I've learned to let someone show me rather than see their chart and assume things. Cause of course, everything's, there's always possibilities. But it's hard
absolutely.
when I see somebody's chart and I see the potential and I see where they're at, and like I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, but I see you," but then they don't see themselves sometimes, and it's like I see those things in you. So I completely understand with that for sure. Like there's so much, and I think a lot of people just, some people hear astrology and their, eyes gloss over and whatever, but I absolutely understand that. It is a huge um energetic like offering, I guess, when you're sharing that with somebody. So, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And yeah, no, I think a lot of it is just that the value, like, yeah, our society has taught us what value is hustle and success, and everyone gets tied to like what society's success is. And so really learning like what is what does a successful look like?
Mm.
Life look like for you, and redefining that. And yeah, people always think like, oh, I came here to work on my energy. And I'm like, yeah, as soon as you can align this Kundalini, then all this other things fall into place. Like these are usually just side questions that I ask people to get their minds going. And then it just kind of happens naturally for them, if that makes sense.
hmm So, do you feel
Yeah.
like connecting with that Kundalini is like a primary factor for kind of unleashing everything else?
For me personally, it's like what I base almost everything off of. Whether we are like using that knowledge of it or not, we are working kind of just to kind of clear those energetic channels, which working with our life force and our chakras. And then in my work, we believe like, the deeper we connect with ourselves, the further we're able to connect with others, but that also means the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's a mirror of us. So
Yeah.
if we're not liking whatever is going on out here, then time to go in here. And a lot of people don't realize that, it's scary to sit in your body when you have not ever before, and you have only just been living on the outside. People don't realize how much pain they've been in physically and things like that. And when you start to realize that, you're like, I want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can definitely be a struggle to even watch, some clients and things like that. They're just like, this is painful now. And I'm like, I know. And it's super painful to look in the mirror, but you're doing the work, and we're grateful for it just
Yeah.
because, not a lot of people are.
And I think there gets to a point I feel like, yeah, I've been on my journey for almost 8 years. And it's only been until the last like year or two that I can say that now when I get to those points, I get excited because I'm like, oh, I get to see something else new about myself, as challenging as it is. Right. But in the beginning, it's like, it is so overwhelming. I cried. Like, I used to pride myself that I never cried. I would like, all these things. And then as soon as I like opened it up, because like I'm a Leo moon, I have in human design, I'm emotional authority. So my emotions are like everything. And I suppressed that for so long that like the first 2 years that I like opened myself up, I cried every single day. I was like, does it ever end? Like, this is so overwhelming.
Absolutely.
But
Hmm.
yeah, but now it's like when I have to cry, I just let myself. I'm like, and I have two kids, and sometimes they're like, are you okay? I'm like, just letting it out. It's like, it's not even that
Yeah.
big of a deal now. It's just like, I just have to release it and then move on. But yeah, I was talking to somebody recently, and he was saying his brother, I guess, has, alcohol issues and a whole bunch of things, but his brother had to quit drinking for, I think, legal reasons or something. And he called him and he was like, this is so hard to have to face myself now, right? After like decades
Hmm.
of avoiding through things like alcohol. And I can't even imagine to that extent. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people do, it's like we're always doing the busy work so that we don't sit with ourselves. Like if I'm ever sitting at home and I'm like, what can I do now? I'll be like, just take 2 minutes and just sit. Like you don't have to do anything, right? Just trying to, because as a
Yeah.
manifesting generator, I know my energy is so fast. So I know like that was probably a lesson for you, right? To not be like busy, busy, busy
Absolutely.
all the time and to be okay with the slowness. And even I feel like the way that I talk now, I try and slow it down because I'll be like, duh, 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 but then it's like, no, let's think about what we're saying and let's really be more
Yeah, I'm the
intentional.
same way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, in the last few years and particularly, yeah, I want to recognize that, that's growth for you. That's awesome
Mm-hmm.
that you're able to create that space and you're leading by example for your kids, that's we definitely need more of that, I think, as generations go on, we're not just dealing with our traumas, we're dealing with our parents' traumas and their traumas that were put on them, So it's so important to lead by example. Um, and I would definitely say, even I sometimes am reminding myself, you're right, it's a big lesson for me. Like, I have to schedule in breaks because otherwise oh, go, 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 go. And in particularly, yes, in the last couple of years, I definitely speak slower. And when I am in my fast mode, I'm like, okay, there's a young part of me, and they're very excited about this. Let's slow
Mm-hmm.
this down. Um, but it's still just a continuous, like just because you have the tools, you got to remind yourself and then you catch yourself. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just means that you're quicker to catch yourself and kind of
Yeah.
recorrect.
Yeah. Or quicker to like steer yourself back if you've
Yeah,
went a little
exactly.
too
Just
far to one
recorrect,
side. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Can we talk about like the energy with like sexual trauma and because even if it's, again, big T, little t, even if it's just conditioning from society and, avoiding things, how we sort of come back into ourselves if we've experienced something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely being someone coming from like sexual trauma, when you have triggers, I highly recommend like kind of having your go-to thing. For me, because my work is so heavily based on Kundalini, breath, sound, and movement, key.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I play like crystal sound bowls, so sometimes like you have a trigger that's your go-to. You got to find those things that are gonna self-soothe. That's what I highly recommend. But if you can't like be anywhere and do anything, breath. Breath is an immediate something that can change. And I want to recognize, like, even you were mentioning earlier, sometimes you like steer away from the breath work. Even when we're in meditation, as long as we're being intentional with breath, like that's breath work to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell clients that too, because I was the same way of like, I should do like a breathwork session this week or something like that. And you end up like getting down on yourself. But really, as long as you're bringing intention into it, it changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely would say when you're in these kind of active places, I obviously work with people that have like sexual trauma. When it's immediately triggered in a bedroom, it's important to know like who you're with to be able to have that communication.
Mm-hmm.
Or just like know that you're with someone that's going to respect, like, hey, stop now, and allow you to have that space and what it needs. What I'll say from my personal experience is it is not easy, and with different partners, it might take different things. And so over the years, my self soothing has absolutely changed. And again, just because I know of these traumas doesn't mean that these triggers don't happen. It just means that I'm able to help myself a little bit quicker. Like moving into breath work, either stopping where I am or realizing that I can come back into it, or maybe not at all. And um, yeah, I work a lot on learning what is self-soothing for someone,
Mm-hmm.
because sitting in yourself is hard, helping yourself is harder too. A lot of the
Yeah.
times, like we get into that place, and then learning how to help yourself becomes that next level of even like the journey. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it takes just a lot of like self reflection, self communication. And I would say, personally, for me, my most immediate tool is breath. Always come
Yeah.
down to the breath.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that will immediately connect you to your body. And you have to remind yourself that you're not in that space, in that place anymore. The brain is literally wired to put us back into that space in that place. So it will literally, I mean, I know I used to have literally almost as if it was flashbacks. The whole room would change, you know.
Mm.
Um, and nothing like being able to close my eyes and start breathing and then reminding myself, like, oh, this is today's date now, and oh, this is where you are. And it definitely takes to going all the way back for sure. I think a lot of people think, oh, I know about this trauma, I know about my trigger, it should just be like super easy, I can just jump out of it. And even with years of work, sometimes it just hits that simple nerve in your body and it takes you all the way back. And so, really having grace with yourself when that happens too.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one specific thing that I thought I had moved past. And then I was with like my most recent partner, and he did something that out of nowhere like triggered it. And I just started sobbing. And I was like, where did it come from? I mean, luckily he was a very safe person that I could kind of articulate that like in the moment, like, give me a second, you know? But
Yeah,
then afterwards, I was like, I wonder what the energetics, like, what was the thing that had my body all of a sudden remember that,
absolutely.
is,
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I want to recognize that it's maybe not even something that that person did. It's something that, um, as you mentioned, you're already doing yoga. You might have brought something up from your nervous system, from your fascia, because our bodies are sponges.
mm,
So we even hold trauma from birth in our bodies still. And even though you might not be able to like connect with it in this lifetime, it's still within you. And so who knows, you might have activated something in meditation, it brought it up close to the surface, and then he might have, or your partner might have just touched your skin in the right way, or the air might have hit your skin in the right way.
mm,
It really just, it could be so many different things. I think a lot of times, I know at the beginning of my journey, I always wanted to narrow down what was it, what happened, what was said. And I want to recognize sometimes it's not always that. It's a combo of things. It's
mhm.
really hard to kind of go back and narrow it down exactly. But of course, kind of being able to sit through that, you kind of are able to recognize, okay, this is what I'm feeling from it at least. And that's kind of key, you know?
Yeah, I had to eventually like let it go because I was like, I don't know that I'll be able to figure out exactly what it was, that
Right.
came up, but I feel like I handled it pretty well, like in the moment, and was able to move through it, but yeah, it's
And
interesting, and
that's
it's
key.
mhm,
That's just, recognizing it and then trying to re-steer yourself, not
yeah.
over analyzing, coming with our monkey brain, and then
Oh, I can do
kind of
that so
putting
hard.
ourselves, yeah, exactly. And then just kind of putting ourselves in even more narrow box about it, you know?
hmm hmm
Yeah,
Yeah, it's can be almost like overwhelming when you think about how much we store that's not even necessarily ours. Like you said, we hold things in our body just like from birth, from our mothers, from and that's why I think sometimes this work can be overwhelming because it's not like we're just doing the work from now. Like I've had things
absolutely.
come up from my childhood that I don't remember that I know weren't even intentionally meant to traumatize me, but I'm like, then you connect the dots and you're like, oh my gosh, that's why X bothers me now, or like whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely. Trauma is, yeah, I work a lot with it. We don't realize like how much sexually we're withholding because of trauma and things like that often, but trauma just means our needs aren't getting met. And so that could look like so many different things. And even just our parents, like they were doing their best, but they maybe were not able to meet our need in that moment. And so it becomes trauma. And so, yeah, there's some things that I know that have come up, and I'm like, why am I even like, that's not even that traumatic? And then I have to recognize, like, but that was trauma for me then. And I
mhm.
like being able to work through it now. And we actually store up to 9 generations of trauma within us. And so, yeah, you're not even doing the work or just yourself or your most recent parents or your most recent grandparents, like their grandparents and their grandparents and beyond. And so, yeah, it can get confusing when you're like, why do I feel like this?
Mhm.
And then eventually something will click and be like, okay, that was not even mine, but I'm glad I'm able to work through it now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what motivates me to like continue to do the work because my daughter's 14 and she's dealing with a lot of mental health things. And I know that part of it is her own experiences, part of it is my experiences, part of it is my mom and my grandmother, right? So
Yeah,
I want to help her so much. And also, I can only help her as much as she wants to help herself. So that's where I kind of I have to focus harder on my work because when I'm doing my work, I am helping her whether she realizes it or not, you know? And so I'm glad that you brought that
absolutely.
up. That's so powerful because we're doing so much work when we're working on ourselves. It's not just us.
And yeah, like I said, you're leading by example, and like that's what we need most right now. Like, I know for myself, I'm going through the process of reparenting myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's also not only helping myself, it's inspiring to my sister, it's inspiring to my mom as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I'm affecting generations ahead as well, you know? So just doing your own work, it becomes a ricochet no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. What is like, this is kind of a big question and I'm trying to like figure out how to refine it because it's like I know that like this I mean this work is so powerful, right? So it's like I guess what is the benefit of then reclaiming our sexuality? And like what is that? I mean, I know, you know, we've talked about being in our energy and doing this work and things like that, but I guess
Yeah.
yeah.
Reclaiming your body, I mean, it really means living like your most authentic life. When we're able to reclaim our body, we're understanding, again, when these triggers come up, we're immediately able to sense into our bodies, tell it that it is safe, tell it that we're in a different place, and be able to move from a place of safety creates um, our most authentic life. I mean, with trauma running us and those blockages, we're coming from a place of kind of scarcity or fear or whatever it may be. And we have these parts of us kind of managing the way we want our lives to turn out so that we think it's going to be the best way, but we're really not coming from our most authentic parts. Um, we're not living our most authentic life and our truth. We're, um, it's so typical that I work with shame and guilt and fear. That's
Mm-hmm.
really, those are the big topics that I work with within there within the womb space, if you will. And I'll say from my own personal experience, now being able to move in my body and move from my womb, I am more successful. Originally, I was like, you have to do this and it will be this way and this will be the outcome. And I was really just shutting off my body because my body was really sending me like a ton of red flags like, no, 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 stop. That's not what you should do. You should actually rest and totally forget everything you said, kind of a deal, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And now I would say I'm by far much more successful. I'm um have way more value with my time and again living my most authentic truth. It doesn't mean that these things don't come up and I don't have to not work through them. It just means that I'm able to sit my body a little bit better while they do happen and then realize like okay, this was fearful because in the past, some things didn't work out if I did it like this, or if previously I used to do it like this, and so it felt good like this. But just recognizing things change and shift. So my body's trying to tell me now, like, okay, now that's not really suiting you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, really just being able to be in your body, you're also living in your most authentic truth and living a more pleasurable life doing that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if we're trying to always live society's truth or whatever they think of the path that we should be on, we're really just keeping ourselves further and further away from pleasure, even just those everyday pleasures. I know for myself, I was living a very mundane kind of style, and I woke up and it felt successful, if you will, but it didn't feel very pleasurable in life. I wasn't like waking up and like, yes, I get to do this and this is the life I get. And yeah, being able to like work with my Kundalini, live in my body and work from my heart, life feels more vibrant. It feels like when I wake up, it's a blessing. It's not a, like, oh man, often we hear about that Monday feeling, like for sure. Everyone
Mhm.
has those thoughts and things like that still, but then I'm able to get on the mat and I start connecting with my energy again. And like it's almost an immediate shift. I'm like, I get to have this. I'm in this place, and um now I'm in a place of like being able to share that, but that came from learning what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to share that, but now I'm in a place and my energy told me this is where we should shift to. And um, yeah, so I'm living a more authentic being and self
Mhm.
and life, really.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I teach embodiment through health and human design. That's sort of my like
I love
avenue,
that.
but it's I think that the idea of defining success for yourself is because we're all so different. We all have different energy types, like all of that. And I feel the same way, especially as a sacral being, which I feel like is so connected to the Kundalini, right? That makes so much sense, and that is
Absolutely.
something that you feel very called to. But also as the generator type, like finding that excitement in what you do, because sort of the same, like I used to get up in the morning and my first thought was like, oh, I want to go back to bed. Oh, I don't want to go to work. Oh my God, I'm so tired. It was so negative. I would catch myself in that negative like thought. And now I wake up and I can just visualize my day, or I visualize a podcast episode, or it's so different the energy between, oh my God, I have to do this, to waking up, be like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I get to like talk to people today and I get to do this. And it's such a beautiful thing. But it did shift that, like, okay, I don't want to work corporate 9 to 5 and make 100 grand. That doesn't excite me. Like,
Absolutely.
it would be cool to travel the world and have all this excess of money, but I don't want to work my life doing something I don't value. So like having to have that shift. And then on top of it too, something that you said too, like your body will always tell you. And I think that, which is such a big part of this conversation, being so disconnected from it, whether it's sexuality, whether it's just like the energetics or what your body's telling you. Because I remember I was in an abusive relationship and I ignored my body so hard. And it got to the point where like I had so many gynecological issues. Like I was constantly at the doctor and she's like, I don't know what's wrong. She's like, nothing's actually wrong, but like, I don't know why this keeps reoccurring. And as soon as I got divorced, never experienced again in my life. So it's like my body, like
Yeah.
sexually, literally was screaming at me, like was trying to push him out and like
Rejecting.
keep him like away.
Absolutely.
It was wild.
Hmm.
I'm one that in itself was like, wow, my body was literally, it started quietly and I didn't listen. Then it got louder. And then it was just like, we're going to do it for you, if you're not going to listen to
Yeah.
us. So really,
Oh,
really.
wow. So powerful.
Yeah. And that's why I think
Yeah.
this work is so powerful, to come in and like really be able to listen to yourself and be attuned to yourself. And I think even wrapping it, into sex, like being able to be that attuned to not only your body, but if you're with a partner or, that sort of like energetic flow is so beautiful. And we don't often experience it, as much as I feel like we could. And it's the best experience.
Absolutely. I think a lot of my own journey was learning to give myself permission,
Mm,
especially, yeah, coming from sexual trauma. I mean, it was something that I told myself, I mean, you do in a relationship. So I mean, that's just what you do. But it wasn't that enjoyable for me. Or it was something that I overthought. Like,
mm,
I just was like, this is all I need. This is like, and learning that I could give myself permission to allow myself to receive pleasure and just receive in general. Learning to give myself permission, that was a big game changer for me and what I share with others. Um, so often we just won't give ourselves permission because, yeah, we are in that fast-paced mode with society and what is the next success that I can have and how are we measuring ourselves? And it's never about how much pleasure, like how
mm,
pleasurable can you make your life? And so that's definitely how pleasurable can you make this moment is a question I tell clients to ask themselves when they're struggling.
Yeah.
And it begins to shift and transfer to all day and all the time, you know?
Mm-hmm. Can we
Yeah.
like pause on that specifically with sexuality and then like even kind of broadening it to like everything else? Because I love that question because I think there's so many women that I speak to that like don't have orgasms in their relationships and or don't even know what it's like. And I mean, it's I think like you said, it's the fact that we're not allowing ourselves to know that we can have pleasure in this too. And it's like, how do
Okay.
we shift that and allow ourselves to experience something that we haven't experienced before that is possible for us?
Yeah, so I would say for me personally, what really did the shift was mirror work. Um, it definitely is just a lot of personal inner work,
Mm,
being able to tell yourself that it is okay. And by all means, sometimes it doesn't, you know, it's a journey. It might feel really good for a really long time, and then you might have that moment where you're like, oh, no, it doesn't really feel that great right now, you know? But for me, giving myself permission took me looking at myself in the mirror over and over and over and doing so. And when it comes to kind of more of like female side of like, yeah, I can't tell you how many women I've talked to that haven't had an orgasm or have had an orgasm, but not with a man, and
mm,
won't go deeper in on their own exploration to kind of find what works for them. And I do like try and acknowledge, you know, everyone is responsible for their own pleasure. So it took for me to look in the mirror and be like, okay, this is actually what I like. And again, it's hard to look in the mirror. And sometimes it's hard to look in the mirror while you're naked, you know? It's definitely not like an easy journey at all. But what I would say is that I became my safe zone doing that.
mm,
And something when I work with clients, like mirror work is one of the number one homework that I give all the time and in different ways. And what I would say is it just takes self curiosity and going into yourself, and that means looking at yourself, whether it be in a mirror, or just in general, being able to sit in your own body, and a lot of self grace and love because we do have those immediate parts of ourselves that are like, oh, this is shameful. Oh, I hear, oh, you're wasting your time all the time. That's some of those trying to get me away and get me out of my own body all the time, you know? Again, just because I do this work doesn't mean that I don't run into those things. And um, yeah, there's just, you know, you got to sit with yourself and remind yourself and give yourself that permission. And a lot of it for me was mirror work and mantras until I kind of rewired the brain. But I definitely recommend mirror work. The more that we are seeing, we're actually beginning to kind of rewire in the brain. So it's really important. And I highly also recommend kind of any way you can engage the senses. It's one of the reasons why I fell into Tantra. But again, when we're actually engaging any kind of sense, we're rewiring the brain even more. And so, yeah, you know, with somatic work, that's kind of really important when we're dropping in. So, kind of small recommendations, but it definitely takes a lot of grace.
mm-hmm. As a Taurus, I definitely like activating the senses. That to me is so important. And I know a lot of men, I mean, I think obviously, okay, this is rewind. It's so important to do that in our work for sure. And like being able to communicate that. And I know I've spoken to a lot of men that it's like, oh my gosh, you need how much time or you need this. It's like, I guess it goes back to that conversation at the beginning where it's such like a business. So how are we, I mean, beyond like doing our own work, I mean, and conversations like this are so important because sharing this with people and allowing people to listen to it or maybe sharing with their partner is powerful because I think that there needs to be a complete like rewiring of the view. Whereas when you bring up to a man, like I need foreplay or I need this, and they're just like, oh, 40 minutes is way, you expect me to do that every single time. And it's like, well, first of all, like you can, I feel like there's so many different ways. Like you can text me
Yeah,
throughout the day, send me a picture. You're activating my senses by like for me visually or painting a picture, but people don't often want to like engage like that. They just
put
want
in
the
that work.
quick, like, I'm like, this isn't intimacy. I've learned that it's not. I used to accept anything. It's like, whatever you want to give me, I'll
Right.
take, you know? But I think the more
Yeah.
I've become embodied, And maybe because I'm becoming more embodied, I'm attracting more people that are open to that. But
Absolutely. You know, you're kind of changing your frequency as well, it sounds like. So you're drawing men in. But yeah, I would say with that, the biggest thing is getting a conversation going. It is so unrecognized by men that, yeah, we are actually detrimental to our wombs, our vaginas, if we are not having about like 20 minutes of warm up because it
Mhm.
takes about 20 minutes to orgasm. So we should be having about that same time to warm up and be feeling into ourselves and our bodies beforehand. The woman moves from her heart. That's what opens her womb space. Yes, that's very commonly well known. And yes, the man is a little bit more directed with, you know, his private part, and that opens up his heart. So it's kind of like a catch 22. But I think opening up the conversation is key. And yeah, I think a lot of it is like because women are scared to own their own orgasm and own their own pleasure, it's so hush hush with men still. It's super, I understand, it's super hard to start the conversation, you know? It's something that you're like, oh, what? Why can't he just cater to that? Why doesn't he understand? But I can tell you now, being in this line of work in the last few years, how when I start the conversation, I just drop some women facts. Men are like immediately jaw drop, like, wait, what? It takes women that long, and oh, this and that, and it's like we're just really uninformed. We have
Mhm.
not started the right conversations around sex, and that includes like in schools. I know for myself, it was like fifth grade and it was very anatomical, and that was it. And there wasn't, I didn't have like really a sex conversation with my parents. I remember my mom being like, okay, you're going to go on birth control because I had an older boyfriend, but it wasn't like, there was no information around it. Everything that I know was definitely like self experience and now either self taught or learned through courses. And so, as hard as it is, I definitely would say it starts with starting the conversation yourself. And there's a lot of like great, um, I guess only one's coming to mind right now, but there's just like different avenues that you can look up as couples that will bring in different tools to try different new ways and different things and learn about like positive communication and active listening and things like that. So there's definitely more tools nowadays, but it takes the conversation to be started to go searching for it together.
Mhm. Are
So,
there like cuz we're talking about like heterosexual couples at the moment, but do you find that
yes.
non-heterosexual couples still have like not the same issues, but that I mean, I don't know, I'm trying to word it. Like the same sort of issues with maybe orgasm or
For
time
the
or
For the most part, I would say it's like less common, but I feel like that has to do with like it's a little bit more common to have better communication when you're
Mhm.
in a same sex couple or whatever it may be. Um, and this is just from what I've witnessed. By
Mhm.
all means, that doesn't necessarily mean any like that is the only thing. By all means, sometimes like withholding orgasm, again, it has nothing to do with the person. It might just be an inner trauma. And so it can be a range of things, but I would say that typically with a heterosexual couple, things are a little bit more hush hush on different ends, whatever it may be. Like we're just not really as quick to be as open, I guess, in some ways. Just because I feel like a lot of it does have to do with misogyny, just men idolizing women, but it's not that women don't do the same thing to men. And so we kind of put each other in these categories. And the moment that we think that like we want to talk to our partner about not being in that category or like, oh, I don't actually embody this as much as like maybe you think, it becomes kind of that revert back to trauma, like, okay, society told me this. And so, but by all means, like, again, just because you're opposite sex couple or same sex couple, it does have same issues, but
Mhm.
being able to communicate a little bit more, I would say, is a little bit different in the heterosexual realm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that I know for my own journey, it's just been like really feeling safe in my safe and like confident in my body to be able to communicate those things. And that, kind of like what this podcast has been about. It's just a lot of work to get to that place where you're okay with whatever the response is, from somebody else.
absolutely. I actually do like a no exercise, and I will have like clients go and just everything they do that weekend or whatever, like they have to say no. Like
Mm.
they cannot, it doesn't matter. Like even if you want to go do something, that's what I tell people. Like this is a weekend about no, and being able to like sit with that, and like it's very interesting just to hear the responses, and like even myself, like when you say no to something you want, like sit with that excitement. It is training your body, it's training that body. Like sometimes it's not excitement, sometimes it's anger and things like that. And so you're creating more resiliency. And then you're also standing up with more confidence when you don't want to do something. You have like that connection and um, that remembering in the body a little bit more, if you will.
Yeah. I always try and tell my kids, I'm like no is a complete sentence. Because my kids will be like, well,
Yeah,
but this, or if you want me to, I'm like, no, if it's no, it's no.
no,
Like, you don't need to make
mm-hmm.
excuses. And I'm like, I call myself a recovering people pleaser and I still struggle with it to this day, but I spent my life
Absolutely.
saying yes when I didn't want to. And so I really try and support them of being like, you don't have to explain yourself. Like, I don't care if it's to your grandmother, to me, to like your teacher. If it's a no, it's a no. Like you can be
Yeah,
respectful and polite about it, but like you don't have to say yes. So I love that. I think
yeah.
that's a powerful
No, I
practice.
love that the sentence is a no. Like a, that's a full sentence because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think so often people I grew up in the era like you always went and kissed your family goodbye, always
Mm-hmm.
give them a hug goodbye, and like now I'm recognizing like I didn't have a choice then, and so it's just like I definitely will be modeling different when I have children, just because it has a long impact on our adult life as
Mm-hmm.
well that we just like don't recognize.
Yeah. Well, and I think like a big one too is food and that same sort of like, I grew up, yeah, you had to eat everything on your plate. You had to do this. And like it didn't matter how big of a portion it is. And I know it drives certain people crazy when like I allow my kids not to finish their meal because I want them to trust their body. Like if you're not that hungry, then the lesson needs to be like, well, don't take so much food if you're not that hungry,
Absolutely.
or like, or with my
Mhm.
son, because he's the king of just taking like not eating his meal, but I'll like leave it out because I know he's gonna get hungry later. So I'm
Right.
like, if you get hungry later, heat that up or whatever, because I overate for so long, even though I wasn't hungry, like my body was stuffed and I would still be eating because it was just
Yeah.
that in my head where like you have to finish everything you have to. And then it becomes like this thing. And I think that we're along that way abandoning ourselves into trusting what our body is telling us. And I think, I mean, like all of this really, is coming into our body, whether it's sexuality, food, health, any of that. I think being inside your body and really listening to it is like the key to all of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And yeah, no, I also struggle with like relationship with food because yeah, I grew up in that era where it's like, yeah, this or nothing. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're like, okay, gotta eat this, and you
Yeah.
have to eat now. And so yeah, no, it's been a very interesting journey to recognize like um picking up the practice of like, yeah, you don't have to overstuff yourself, or like, yeah, you can come back for more. So like I love that you're giving at least your kids a choice. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
very important. And that does help them. The more that you're giving them a choice, the more that they're sitting with their body. I always tell people, our body knows best. So if you
Yeah.
just give it like the time and space to listen,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the times, like when we're reacting subconsciously, like, okay, that's a message from the body, what's coming up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my daughter was like 7 when I came into this work, so I think a lot of her issues stem from 0 to 7. But my son was so young that I noticed how aligned he is to himself and just like the practice, like me, like urging him to like, if you want to eat like food with your hands or like all these things, I just like people call him like the
Yeah,
wild child, and I'm like, he is. But I also notice how much he triggers people because he is himself, and not a lot
I
of
was just
people
gonna
are.
say, Yeah, I was just gonna say because they're so scared of themselves that it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, it is very interesting working with like some clients that have younger kids and then some that have older kids. It's the dynamic around it is very different. And yeah, like almost the brutality that some of these parents are getting from letting their kids be in this freedom
Mm,
mode and listen to themselves is um that's harsh in itself for like as a parent, you know? It's hard to kind of like take that brutality from everyone else. But yeah, no, I commend you for doing that because you are creating like more strength for himself with himself. And
yeah.
that is what we need in this world, you know? Otherwise, we're always going to be answering to like the same system and the same process. And I mentioned earlier about like living in a more vibrant world is what it feels like for me. And like I often describe it like it would just be black and gray. Like it would just always be black
Mm,
and
yeah. I have just a couple questions in like wrapping it
gray.
up. But so, what would you say? Because it's the emotional mastery podcast, I always kind of ask a little bit about emotions. But what would you say your relationship with emotions has, how it's evolved, like from the beginning of your journey until like now, and how has that really come into play with all this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, you know, originally, like I said, what set me on my path was probably yoga, and I was getting into a calmer state, but more often, but that wasn't really helping, if that makes sense. Then when I had those triggers, they were still just bigger blow ups. And really learning how to sit in my body and recognize where these emotions were coming from and kind of point them out. That's what really started to do that shift of owning my emotions rather than letting them own me, if you will.
Mhm.
And so, really, in my own journey, I would honestly say, again, about 3 years ago, that's when the embodiment of the shift started to happen. Like a lot of this work and knowledge had been there. I even was like helping others sharing it, but the embodiment really came about 3 years ago. And yeah, like you said, you even talk slower now. Like I can feel the shift and just by the way my personality has shifted as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm.
And then the final question I have is like, what is one thing that you wish like everybody could know about, whether it's their body or sexuality or the combination of the both?
Yeah, I wish that everyone would know that it's safe to give themselves permission
Mm.
and permission to receive or not to receive. I think also sometimes in this journey, like I was like, why don't you want to receive right now? Why don't you want to receive and almost beat myself up about that? And working with others with sexual trauma, it's like they beat themselves up about it not almost being normal because yes, it is a normal human trait, but just because you don't want it doesn't mean you're not normal. So definitely that it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Giving yourself permission though.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing and sharing your energy. You have such a beautiful, like calming energy. And so I think that's a testament to like the work that you've done and everything that you've, achieved. And so I'm so grateful that you were here to share. And if you want to let everyone know if there's something that you're working on or where they can find you as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, of course. And yeah, no, feel free to find me either on Instagram or YouTube at Tantrika McKenna. I'm releasing kind of Kundalini yoga flows, different kind of yoga flows, as well as ceremonies on YouTube. And then I have kind of daily tricks on Instagram. And I definitely recommend giving a follow for that or checking out my website. And I am going to be launching a 6 week program soon for embodiment. So definitely, if you're interested in learning how to own in your body and sitting with these emotions, and we'll be sharing kind of a little bit about the Kundalini and how to work with it in that program as well. Definitely check that out. But I'll be posting about that on Instagram and on my website. So
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And of course, I'll have everything linked in the show notes so everybody can just go down and click it.
beautiful, awesome, and yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful to connect.
Yeah, you're welcome.